Hi, I'm Don Rogers, and with me today is Carolyn Martin from CHEC. And today we want to talk not necessarily a lot about bills, because everybody's done the bill analysis, but kind of what it was like this session, because it's a little bit different than certainly I was used to, as a part-time activist, but somebody who was up there every day, it was probably much more difficult. Before we do that, though, why don't you tell us what CHEC is and what you do for them?
Yeah, CHEC is Christian Home Educators of Colorado, and they're a support organization for Christian homeschoolers across the state. There are probably about 30 to 40,000 students who are homeschooled throughout Colorado, and we just support them by having workshops, and we just got off our conference last week. So that's the kind of stuff we do.
Okay, but you're in the legislature all the time. And you're not doing that as because you're just like being up there, okay? So
No.
you're doing this for CHEC. So tell us about that part of it. What is your function for CHEC for that?
I'm the legislative liaison, or if you want to get technical, I'm a professional lobbyist for CHEC. And I am watching out for religious liberty, parental rights, and home education. So specifically bills that will affect or limit those rights that we have. So that's really what I'm doing up there.
And that appeals to a lot of us, and certainly as somebody who might watch this. But we've been doing this for about 10 years. I've known you for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But before we had a split legislature. And so seems that it was a lot different than maybe it was for now. So I kind of want to know, since you've been doing this for a couple years for CHEC,
Yeah, 3 years.
what was the difference? I mean, from the time when you had a split legislature, how for you, from your perspective, somebody who was there all the time, was it harder? Was it easier? What made the two different? Because today, as you know, we have one party rule in Colorado, and it was a very tough session from my point of view. So I want to kind of get your thoughts on that too. So what was it like? What was the difference between a split legislature and one party rule?
Well, when the Republicans had control of the Senate, you really just had to work the Senate. You had to go to the senators who were in the Kill Committee, because you knew the leadership's going to send the really bad bills to the Kill Committee. And that's really where you worked. Did a lot of your work was in the Kill Committee. And this session, you just had to work every single angle. And it was just a lot harder. And they were entrenched with their ideology. And the Republicans really wanted to work with the Democrats. So that made it harder too, because you couldn't convince them to stand strong on liberty issues.
So when you're talking about the Kill Committee, let's talk about what that is for somebody who doesn't really know. Both parties won't call it a Kill Committee, obviously not. But what is it from the layman's perspective, and do both parties handle that the same?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that committee is generally as the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. That's the one they've chosen because there aren't a lot of bills that deal with those issues. So that committee, the leadership will put the strongest people they have in that committee. So the strongest conservatives will be there and the strongest liberals will be there, and they will be clashing all session. And both the House and Senate have their committees. But this year, the overwhelming Democrat control in the House, it was 41 to 24, meant the Kill Committee was stacked way with a lot of liberals. So I forget the ratio now, Don, but it was huge. It was like 7 to 3 or something. It was tremendous. I mean, there was no way that you were going to even be able to sway that committee. Where in the Senate, it's just 3-2. You got 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. And from your perspective as a professional lobbyist, so it's for me when I look into that, I look at no hope in a situation like that, no matter who particularly has it, and it doesn't really matter which side you of an issue you might be on. If one of the committees, and we'll just call it the Kill Committee, whatever your perspective is, if it's stacked way against you, and we have an ideology, and I want to get to that in a minute, that isn't going to be broken, from from the outside, it almost seems like it's not worth the time. So, but from a lobbyist perspective, do you still work that, and why?
I think you still work it because you need to get your message heard. I mean, it needs to get on the record that there was opposition. There was one particular bill this session that no one showed up but me to oppose. And the news media takes note, oh, there was at least somebody there to oppose it. So I think it's important to push back on those issues, even if you know you're going to lose. You need to work it.
So from the House side is difficult.
Yes.
And it would have been either way. But if we shift to the House or the Senate side, while we have really, again, one party rule, does that make it any easier? Because it's still stacked against you. And if the party in power is drawing a straight line and they're not going to waver, again, what's the issue for you and pushing that so hard, besides the fact you're getting paid, as opposed to somebody like me who does it as a hobby, who might go, I'm done.
Right. Well, I think you've got to talk to those legislators and try to move them as well, because a lot of the even our guys aren't strong on some of our issues. So you've got to try to move them a little at a time, and it might be a bill at a time, and point out the error in the bill to be able to move them, like on parental rights. I say, this marriage bill is a parental rights issue. They know at least somebody's complaining and watching and seeing that they're not standing strong for parental rights. So you got to move them. You have to at least say, what are you doing? Really? Okay. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Well, yes.
I don't know.
But that you're one person in there.
I am one person.
So from the public's perspective, and let's talk. Let's use 1032 as an example. It's probably the most contentious bill that we had all year. When it was started in the House, okay, we had that situation where the overwhelming sentiment on that was going to pass. From your perspective as somebody who had to watch this thing go all the way through, what was the ideal time for activists who might have been opposed to that? When was the ideal time for them to go in and start making the noise?
I can tell you all the time. It had to have been all the time. That's where we lost it with 1032.
And
we came out for the committee hearings, and people spoke against it. They had a prayer rally. They had a rally on Saturday, but they were nowhere. But no one was there at the end when it sat for a while, for a couple months in the Appropriations Committee, thinking it was going to die, and it was resurrected. So if you were there, or at least pushing back on it continually and exposing their falsehoods that they were telling about that bill, we could have had some kind of difference.
Okay, so this would apply, we're using 1032 as an
Yeah.
example, but that would apply in anything that was contentious like that.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, though, because you said that the bill went to the Senate and just sat for a long time. Is that something you think was strategic on the part of the folks, the advocates for this?
No. The advocates for it, yeah, the people that wanted it, the Planned Parenthood and ACLU, yeah, definitely.
So did they just wait it out?
There were a couple of factors. I mean, one was it had a financial, it had a fiscal note on it, so they needed money. So they had to wait till the end of session to be able to know if the money was going to be available for it. So partly it was that, and partly it was strategic because they knew they were going to do some major changes, and they wanted to do them in the final day.
Okay, so from you, okay, what would the street advocates or who might want to help, what can they do better in something like this? Again, it could be 1032, it could be any bill that is going to rile people up to the point where there's a line drawn. So what can those people do to help you? And I know it's difficult for you to answer that because you have a lot of factions for the activists to kind of go through. But what's the number one thing that you think that folks on the street, folks who are involved, folks who want to do something, what can they actually do to make a difference strategically, or is it just make noise all the time, or should there be some planning in that, and kind of maybe educate
yeah.
themselves a little more?
Yeah, see, that's such a complicated thing, and I think it depends on who you are and what you think you're capable of doing, because really putting that pressure on them and continuing to call and email and show up is huge. But if you don't have that, if you're not able to do that, I always have to back up to, we are in a spiritual battle, and we need some serious, deep, abiding prayer. And we need a message, because that was one of the things that they pushed back on 1032 was. Representative Herod said, this bill is not about religion. Well, it may not be about religion, but it was about morality and who gets to teach children morality. And we didn't have that message going forward. They hijacked the message and made us look like we were a bunch of homophobes and racist.
Okay, so who has?
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So it's the messaging, and we were not united in our message. It was a very complicated bill with lots of parts.
Okay, so it's more of a strategic thing. That probably has to be done
Very.
outside of you. Is there some place where folks can go and say, okay, we need to get together here and push certain things, or is it just hope for the best?
Well, and that's the thing that's been difficult working up there, is that we as believers and conservatives don't have that cohesive organization.
So that's really something that we need to get back
We need
together.
to
We
have
did it
that.
10 years ago, and maybe it's something we need to do again. Carolyn, this is very important. I know the next session is coming up, and there's probably a lot of things that people need to do prior. We'd love to have you back and talk specifically about maybe what we can actually do to help you in your position.
Great. Thanks, Don.
Okay, this is Don, and again, Carolyn Martin from CHEC. Thank you very much.